Hey mathematics learners, welcome to Distance Learning with Lee, where I make learning mathematics super easy. On today's video tutorial, guys, we are going to be tackling question 5.1 as well as question 5.2 from the grade 12 mathematical literacy paper 1 that was written in November 2022, right? In question 5.1, guys, we are just going to be interpreting data that is given to us, so it falls under the umbrella of data handling, right? And we are also going to be applying the concept of range that we learned in previous video tutorials. Practically, remember in the previous video tutorials, guys, I showed you how we basically supposed to calculate range, okay, and I explained that it's the maximum minus the minimum. In this video tutorial, guys, we're going to be applying that concept practically. What do we actually mean when we're talking about the range? Okay, then in question 5.2, guys, we're going to be looking at questions pertaining to exchange rates. So we're going to be converting currencies, right? We are also going to be looking at an interest calculation, right? Where you guys need to basically calculate the interest that was accumulated, compounded, right, annually. And you guys need to remember, when you obviously deal with your interest calculations, you guys don't really work with a particular formula, right? But you basically have to show steps that you applied when you were basically calculating your interest, right? So please make sure that you watch the whole of this video tutorial for you guys to see how I basically approach question 5.2.5, right? So before we get started with today's video tutorial, guys, please make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. Please make sure that you click on that notification bell so that you get notified every single time I upload a new video tutorial, guys. And also don't forget to give this video tutorial a huge thumbs up, because that really helps the channel grow and it helps the channel to reach more learners that want to better their mathematics marks. Also, guys, if you want to support the channel, please consider being a part of the Maths Gang, right? If you really appreciate the content that I'm bringing to you guys and you want to help the channel grow, please also consider being a part of the Maths Gang. So without any further ado, guys, let's get started with today's video tutorial. So like I mentioned, guys, we are going to be tackling question 5.1, right? And question 5.1 is under the umbrella of data handling. We're going to be interpreting these line graphs that are given to us. We're going to be basically applying the concept of range, right? Practically. And that is basically it. So question 5.1 is nice and easy, guys. Let's basically get started with it. Okay, so it says during the 2008 to 2012 period, South Africa recorded an average growth rate of just over 2%, largely due to the global economic recession. So we are told that, okay, there was a growth rate in the South African economy of just 2% due to the global economic recession. A recession is when there's a decline in the economic activity. Okay, and when people are unemployed, guys, we know that people basically lose their homes because they can't pay for their bonds, right? And also businesses go bankrupt. Why? Because now people don't really have buying power, or don't have the capacity to go to shops and basically buy. Okay, so that is basically what we are talking about when we're talking about economic recession. Okay, we are told that Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, and the Western Cape collectively contributed a significant portion to the country's growth. Okay, and we're told that the graph below shows the contributions of these three provinces towards the different sectors. Okay, so we are told that this graph basically represents contributions made by these three provinces to the country's economic growth, right? And the sectors that are given to us here on the horizontal axis, guys, you guys know the horizontal axis is also known as the x-axis. Okay, so in the x-axis we have the different sectors: the finance, transport, wholesale, and agriculture, right? And on the vertical axis we have the percentage of the contributions made by these provinces. Okay, we're also given a key here at the top right. Gauteng is basically indicated or symbolized by these dotted lines here, but I'm just going to highlight this in yellow so that you guys are able to basically follow when I'm doing my explanations. So I'm just going to make the Gauteng line in yellow. Okay, so that just makes it easy for you guys to follow with me as I'm basically doing the explanations. Okay, I'll make the Western Cape red. So we know the Western Cape is the dot dots, but I'll make it red here. Okay, and we also have KwaZulu-Natal, which is the solid black line. Okay, so I've just done that just to make it easy for me to make reference to the different provinces. Okay, so it says, note, a global economic recession leads to a drop in the country's economy. So I already explained that when I defined what recession is. Okay, so it says, use the above information to answer the questions that follow. Question 5.1.5 says, 5.1.1 says, write down the province that contributed the most to the wholesale sector. Okay, so we're going to go to the wholesale sector. So the wholesale sector is here, right? And we're going to see which province is the highest in this sector, right? Because then the province that has the highest percentage, right, is the province that contributed the most. Okay, so in this case, what do we see, right? In the wholesale sector, the province that had the highest percentage is actually the red province, right? Which is Western Cape, because it contributed the highest percentage of 16%. Okay, so we're going to write that down. So the province that contributed the most to the wholesale sector was the Western Cape. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Question 5.1.2. The total amount contributed, right, by the three provinces to agriculture was 8.3 billion. Okay, so the total amount that was contributed, okay, to agriculture was 8.3 billion. We need to determine which part of this amount Western Cape contributed. Okay, so with this question, guys, you need to be very careful. Okay, all right, because we are told that the amount contributed by these three sectors to agriculture was 8.3 billion. Okay, so let's have a look at what is happening there by agriculture. Right, so by agriculture we see that, okay, the yellow province, which is Gauteng, right, contributed, we can just say approximately 3%. Okay, then we see that the red province, which is the Western Cape, contributed 4%. And we also see that KwaZulu-Natal, okay, contributed as well 4%. Okay, right? So the total percentage contributions, right, that these three provinces made towards the agricultural sector amounted to 4% plus 4% plus the 3%. So we can just approximately say that the contributions by Gauteng, we can just say it's like 3% there. Okay, all right. So in total, these three provinces' contributions amounted to 11%. So if we actually want to get the actual figure or the actual amount, right, that the Western Cape contributed towards the agricultural sector, what do we need to do, right? We already know that in total, okay, we already know that the total contributions, okay, amounted to 8.3 billion. Okay, how can you write 8.3 billion? So we already know that the number billion, right, basically has 9 zeros. Okay, so because this 3 is already taking the place value of one of those zeros, how would we write this as how would we write out this whole value? Okay, it would be, right, it's going to be 8 points, right? So the 3, remember I mentioned that we need to have 9 zeros, but now this 3 has already taken the place value of one of those zeros, okay? So we're going to count that as 1, okay, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so that is how we are going to basically write out 8.3 billion, okay, right? And we know this 8.3 billion basically is the total contributions that the Western Cape, that Gauteng, as well as KwaZulu-Natal contributed, okay, right? And we know that this amount basically represents only 11%, okay? So now how can we determine how much the actual value, right, that is contributed by the Western Cape, okay? So in this case, we don't want the percentage, okay? We want how much out of that 8.3 billion was contributed by the Western Cape. Okay, so how can you basically get that value? Okay, guys, so all the time, right, we're going to take that 8.3 billion, multiply, okay, by what you want. So you want the amount that was contributed by the Western Cape, right? And then here we can see that the Western Cape, right, contributed how much percent? So let's see there. The Western Cape, right, is the red line there. We can see that it contributed 4%, okay? So you multiply by what you want, which is the 4% that is contributed by the Western Cape, divided by what you have. This 8.3 billion, what does that amount represent, right? It represents the 11% of the contributions, okay? Right. So that is basically how you need to tackle this question. Why are we not tackling this question in this way? Why did we not take the 8.3 billion and multiplied it by 4% and divided that by 100? Why didn't we do this? Okay, because someone out there might have probably thought that, okay, I can just take the 8.3 billion and multiply that by 4% because we already know that the Western Cape made 4% of the contributions and you divide it by 100. Okay, so we can't do it in this way. Why? Because we are not told that this 8.3 billion, right, represents the contributions made by all the provinces, right? We were just told that this 8.3 billion only represents the contributions that were made by the 3 provinces, right? And because it was just the contributions that were made by the 3 provinces, we cannot divide by 100%, but we need to divide by the percentage that represents the 3 provinces, which is 11% and not 100%. Okay, so that is why this approach would be incorrect, right? Because the 8.3 billion only represents, right, the total contributions that were made by the 3 provinces and not all the provinces. So if maybe they gave us a figure and they said that, okay, this amount represents the contributions made by all provinces, then it would make sense for us to then take that amount, then you multiply it by 4, divided by the 100%, okay, or the percentage of the total contributions that were made by all provinces. Okay, so please, guys, this part is very important. That is why when it comes to mathematical literacy, you need to think of things in this way, right? When you are given a figure, what percentage does that figure represent? Okay, you need to think of it that way. If you can figure out that, or if you can think of it that way, then you'll know. You just multiply by what you want and you divide by what you have. Okay, so that is why we need to approach this question in this way, right? So if you take 8.3 billion and you multiply by 4% divided by 100, what do we notice still, guys? The percentage cancel. If you punch this into your calculator, you'll find that 8.3 billion multiplied by 4 divided by 11 is equal to 3 billion 18,181,818. Okay, so that is the amount, right, that the Western Cape contributed towards the agricultural sector. All right, let's have a look at question 5.1.3. Identify the sector in which KwaZulu-Natal made a 12% contribution. Okay, so here we want to basically determine the sector, right? Where KwaZulu-Natal made a 12% contribution, right? So all that we need to do, guys, is just literally draw a line, okay, from the 12%, right? And then from there, try to see where there is an intersection with the KwaZulu-Natal province, right? And then this is simple, right? We can already see that the intersection happens where? Okay, where do we see this blue line intersecting with the KwaZulu-Natal province, right? We see that it's intersecting. Remember, guys, the key for the KwaZulu-Natal province is this solid black line, right? And we see that it intersects there, the transport sector. Okay, so to answer the question, right, identify the sector in which KwaZulu-Natal made a 12% contribution. We can see that that sector is the transport sector. Okay, so it's the transport sector. Question 5.1.4. Name the sector that has the largest range. Okay, so in this question, they want you to name, right, the sector that has the largest range. Okay, before we'll even be able to name the sector, right, guys, let's just do a recap of what we said the range was, right? Remember, I explained that when we're basically calculating the range, right, we take the minimum value, right? We take the maximum value minus. So we take the maximum value minus the minimum value. But in this case, guys, they're not asking us to calculate the range of the sector, right? They just want us to basically identify, pinpoint, okay, the sector that has the largest range. Okay, so this is where now the practical application of range basically comes into action, where we now need to show that we understand what is meant when we talk about the range, guys. So to explain this, guys, when we're talking about the range of something, right, we are talking about how something is spread out. In answering this question, right, when we now look for the sector that has the largest range, right, we are actually going to be looking for the sector, okay, that has its values more spread out. Okay, so how can we basically identify that? Let's have a look. What is happening here, right? Remember, there are different sectors here. So I'm going to just section this so that you guys see. We've got the finance, right? We've got the transport, right? We've got the wholesale, right? And we've got the agriculture, right? And I did mention we're going to look for the sector, right, that has its values spread out, right, the most. Okay, because they did mention that they want you to identify the sector that has the largest range, okay, where the values are spread out the most. Okay, so what do we see here? Can we say that the agricultural sector has their values spread out the most? No, because we can see that these values are actually close together. They're not really spread out. Okay, but what do we notice about the finance sector? We notice that in the finance sector, what do we see? That there's a gap there, okay, between the Gauteng and the KwaZulu-Natal percentage value. Okay, so this shows us that, oh, actually then, because now these values are more spread out, right, as compared to the other values in the other sectors, we can then conclude that the finance, okay, sector has the largest range. Okay, because we can see that in this case, okay, the values here were more spread out as compared to the values here. Okay, do you see that there's only a small distance there compared to the distance there of how these values are spread out, right? So that is why then we're going to say that the finance sector has the largest range. Okay, and the last question, name one province that made the most significant contributions towards the growth of the most sectors. Okay, how can you answer this question? Okay, right? So if you're basically looking at these line graphs, right, we want to see which province, okay, made the most contributions, which province contains the highest percentages, right, for most of these sectors, okay? Okay, so let's see. Okay, so if we basically analyze this line graph, right, we can see that, okay, we can see that the province that is actually the highest, right, in most sectors, right, is which province? The Western Cape province, okay? Because we see that there, right, the Western Cape is the highest there, right? Okay, we see that the Western Cape is the highest, the Western Cape is the highest, right? So in most sectors, in the Western Cape is the highest, right? As you can even see, even with the line graph, it goes in most regions, right? The Western Cape's line graph, right, is at the top, right? So from that, we can basically conclude that then the Western Cape made the most significant contributions towards the growth of most of the sectors. All right, so let's write that down. Okay, and we are basically done. Okay, so let's have a look at question 5.2, the last question of this past paper. All right, so let's see, like I mentioned, question 5.2, guys, deals with exchange rates, and we're also going to be calculating interest earned, right? Compounded annually. So please make sure that you watch this whole section. All right. So question 5.2, it says that Ryan is a South African citizen who owns a company in South Africa and wants to buy shares in a company in Canada, right? So Ryan is rich, right? And this person owns a company, right, in South Africa, and they want to buy shares in a company in Canada, right? We are told that table 6 shows the exchange rates for 5 countries on the 17th of March 2022. Let's quickly analyze what this table means, okay? Right? And guys, I've actually gone through exchange rates on the channel, right? Where I explain how you need to basically analyze these types of tables, right? But just to explain what is actually going on here, right? Using the first row, okay, we're already given, okay, in the first column, actually, the currency, right? The euro, the British pound, the Japanese yen, the Canadian dollar, and the Russian ruble, right? And we're given the units per ZAR, right? As well as the ZAR per unit, okay? Basically, what this means is that for 1 euro, okay, you need to have 16 rand point 480 cents, okay? For 1 British pound, okay, you need to have 19 rand and 662 cents, right? For 1 Japanese yen, okay, how many zars, how many rands do you need per that unit? Okay, so you need 0.12565. Okay, for 1 Canadian dollar, right, you need 11 rand and 785 cents, right? And for 1 Russian ruble, you need 0.143373 cents. Okay, so that is basically what, okay, is meant here. All right, okay, so the last column basically tells you how many rands you will get per euro, how many rands you'll get per for 1 British pound, how many rands you'll get for 1 Japanese yen, right? However, this second column does the reverse. Okay, it tells you how many units per rand you'll need, right? So for 1 rand, okay, because it's per rand, for 1 rand, how many euros will you get? You will just get 0.060673 euros. Okay. For 1 rand, how many British pounds will you get? Okay. You will get 0.050862 British pounds. Okay. So in this case, the ZAR per unit tells you how many rands you will get for 1 unit of each of these currencies, and the units per ZAR tells you how many units you'll get from all of these currencies if you just have 1 rand. Okay, let's have a look at the questions. Question 5 point. Okay, we are told that notes, a share is a unit of ownership of a country, right? So they further just explain what they mean when they're talking about a share, because remember they did tell us that Ryan basically wants to buy shares in a company in Canada, right? So okay, we are told to use table 6 to answer the question that follows, right? Question 5.2.1 says identify the currency which is the weakest against the rand. Okay, how will we be able to identify the currency that is the weakest against the rand? Okay, if I'm going to actually just use the last column to just help me answer this question. Okay, we did mention in the last column, we basically are told that for 1 unit of each of these currencies, how many rands will you actually need? Okay, and from here, for us to basically identify the currency that is the weakest, we want to basically point out the currency where you will basically get the currency where you basically use the less amount of rands to basically get 1 unit of that currency. Okay, so what do we see here? It's not the euro, it's not the British pound, but it's the Japanese yen. Okay, because for us to be able to basically get 1 Japanese yen, we just need to have 0.12565 rands, okay, which is the lowest amount on that column. So that basically shows us that the Japanese yen is the weakest against the rand. Okay, because for example, if you basically look at the euro, okay, for you to basically get 1 euro, okay, you need to have 16 rand. Okay, so here we can see that, oh, actually then the euro is the strongest currency against the rand. Okay, because for if you just want 1 euro, right, you will need to have 16 rand. But for you to just get 1 Japanese yen, you just need 0.12 cents. Okay, so that just shows us that the Japanese yen is the weakest against the rand. Okay, let's write that down. Okay, so I mentioned that it's the Japanese yen because you need less rands to get just one of the Japanese yen. Okay, so let's look at the next question. Question 5.2.2. Show how the Russian ruble of 0.143373 ZAR per unit was determined. Okay, so we want to basically show, okay, how the value of 0.143373 was determined. Okay, right? So here, we're going to basically focus our attention on the last column, the last row, okay? And we want to show how that value was basically obtained, okay? So to basically show how this value was obtained, guys, right, we're not going to use this last column, okay? But then we need to now use this column, right, and the information that is given to us, right, okay, to show how this amount was basically obtained, because these columns are actually one and the same, right? It's just that this one looks at how many rands you will need to get one of these currencies, and then this column just looks at how much 1 rand will give you in terms of these currencies. Okay, so to basically answer this question, we're gonna basically write this out the way it is, right? It says units per ZAR, right? So units per ZAR is equal to 6.97481, right? However, we want to basically show how the ZAR per unit of 0.143373 was obtained, right? We want the ZAR per unit, okay? So how can we basically get this equation to be written as ZAR per unit instead of units per ZAR, okay? We're going to basically swap these two values around. And what you do on the left hand side, you also need to do on the right hand side. Okay, so do you guys agree that this 6.97481 can also be written as 6.97741 divided by 1, right? Okay, and if I swap the left hand side, I also need to swap the right hand side. So if I swap the left hand side, right, what happens? The ZAR now is in the top right? And the units now is in the bottom, right? And what you do on the left, you need to do on the right. So the 1 now will be at the top, and the 6.97481 will be in the bottom, right? So what do we now notice? We've got ZAR per units, right? Which is basically what we want here, ZAR per unit. So if you punch this value into your calculator, what do you get, right? You'll find that if you punch 1 divided by 6.97481, right, you get 0.1433730811. Okay, so that is the or how they obtain the ZAR per units, okay, in the last column. All right, question 5.2.3. Ryan decides to invest 1,230,000 in shares in a Canadian company. We need to convert this 1,230,000 into Canadian dollars, right? So now we're converting rands to Canadian dollars. Okay, so what's going to help us to do that? Okay, right? So I just said here, right? Here in the last column, right? It just makes our life easier because we are told, right? If you basically have €1, how many dollars? I mean, how many rands can you get from? How many rands do you need to have €1? How many rands you'll need to have 1 British pound, right? So we're going to be basically using the last column, right, to help us basically convert from the Canadian dollar or from rands to the Canadian dollar. All right, because we already know that for you to get 1 Canadian dollar, right, you need how much? 11 rand and 785 cents. Okay. Okay. So question 5.2.3, we already know that 1 Canadian dollar, you need 11 rand and 785 cents, right? And then we are told that we need to basically convert this 1,230,000 into Canadian dollars, right? So we're going to basically use this equation to help us convert. Okay, so what do we need to do? Very simple. This 1,230,000 is the same as just as saying 1,230,000 divided by 1, right? Then we need to multiply by what we want. We want what? The units in Canadian dollars. So we're going to multiply by 1 CAD. Okay, then we are going to divide it by what we have. And in this case, we've got our units in rands. So we're going to divide it by 11 rand 785 cents. Okay. If you punch this into your calculator, you can just actually even just punch it as 1,230,000 divided by 11.785, or you can punch it as 1,230,000 times it by 1 divided by 11.785. Okay, all right. So if you punch that into your calculator, you'll get a value that amounts to, right, it's the CAD. Actually, the CAD needs to come to the front. Okay, all right. So it's 104,369.9618. Okay, which is approximately equal to, you just round it off to 2 decimal places. All right. So it's 104,369.96 Canadian dollars. All right, let us have a look at question 5.2.4. It says, give one reason why you would motivate Ryan to invest in a Canadian company, right? So for you to basically come up with this reason, right, you need to obviously look at what all the information that has been given to us here, right? Why would you personally advise Ryan to invest in a Canadian company, right? So here, I mean, there are multiple reasons that or responses that you guys can give, right? But one that popped up in my head was that I would basically motivate Ryan to invest in a Canadian company, right? Because Canada, right, or the Canadian dollar has a stronger currency compared to the rand. Okay, so that is one reason I would actually give to Ryan, okay, to motivate him to invest in a Canadian company. Because we saw that, okay, it actually has the Canadian dollar, right? It's actually a stronger currency. For you to get 1 Canadian dollar, you need 11 Rand and 785 cents. Okay. So that is the reason that I would give him, that the Canadian dollar has a stronger currency compared to the Rand. Okay. And the last question, question 5.2.5. After 2 years, right, and 8 months, Ryan sold his shares and received a final amount of 1,529,360, right? In South Africa, Ryan would have received an interest rate of 8.1% compounded annually for 2 years and 8 months, right? So we are basically told that, okay, if Ryan basically decided that now he wants to invest his 1,230,000, right, in South Africa, okay, he was going to basically receive an interest rate of 8% compounded annually for 2 years and 8 months. Okay. Then we are told that Ryan stated that he earned more than 14,000 return on his foreign investment, okay, compared to a potential South African investment. Okay. We need to verify sharing all calculations whether Ryan's statement is valid. So, what's important with this question, right, is that firstly, we're going to be calculating interest. Okay. We're going to be calculating the interest that Ryan basically accumulated from his investment. Okay. And we're going to be calculating this interest, right, taking into consideration that this interest is actually compounded annually. Okay. So, what do they mean when they say that it's compounded annually? Interest is basically earned on interest that basically accumulates. Okay, but then I'm going to explain what this means. Okay, so for us to basically verify whether Ryan's statement is valid, right, we basically need to determine, right, what was the interest, okay, that he generated, okay, from basically investing his 1.2 million shares in South Africa, right? So let's quickly do that. Okay, so we are basically told here that, right, obviously Ryan put his amount or his money in investment account in South Africa for 2 years, right? So we're gonna basically calculate what happened or the interest that he earned in year one. Okay, then we're gonna calculate how much he earned or he made in year two. Okay, and we're gonna basically calculate how much he made in 8 months. Okay, so we calculate year one, year two, and 8 months, right? Meaning that we need to basically convert those months into years. Okay, and then we're gonna add everything together and compare the interest that he earned from saving his investment or saving his money in a South African account to the amount that he made when he basically invested his money in a foreign country. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so how much money was basically or the principal amount that was invested? Okay, so I'm just going to make notes here. The principal amount, I'm going to put that as P, okay, that was invested, right, was 1,230,000. Okay, so that is the amount that we're going to be working with. Okay, so now to calculate the amount of interest that was basically generated in the first year, right, we're going to basically take that 1,230,000, right? And we are basically told that, right, to calculate interest, right, they basically used an interest rate of 8.1%. Okay, so for us to get how much interest was basically accumulated, you're going to just multiply it by 8.1%. So it's the same as just saying 8.1 divided by 100. Okay, so if you punch this into your calculator, you'll basically find how much interest this value, right, that he basically invested in South Africa made him in the first year, right? So if you punch this into your calculator, you'll see that in the first year, right, he made an interest of 99,630. Okay, so what does this mean? At the end of the first year, how much does he now have? Okay, this is the interest earned, right, in the first year, meaning that the total that he now has after 1 year, how much will it be? Because this value just gives us the interest, okay? It'll be the initial amount that he had of 1,230,000 multiplied, actually not multiply, sorry, plus, right, the interest that he earned of 99,630. Okay, so if you punch this into your calculator, you'll find that at the end of the first year, right, Ryan actually has 1,329,630. Okay, so now we're gonna use now this amount that he has at the end of the first year in calculating the interest that he now accumulates, right, in year two, right? So same thing, we're going to take that 1,329,630, then you minus by the interest rate, okay, which is 8.1 divided by 100. Okay, so if you punch this into your calculator, you'll find that at the end of year two, the interest that he basically accumulated, okay, was 107,700.03. Okay, so this is the total interest that he earned in year two. Okay, meaning that, okay, at the end of year two, how much does he actually have now, right? He will have this 1,329,630 plus the interest earned of 107,703 cents. Okay, so if you punch this into your calculator, you'll find that at the end of year two, now in his savings account, he would actually have now 1,437,330.03. Okay, now all that we need to now calculate, right, is the interest that he now earns in the 8 months that are left. Okay, so how do we do that? Okay, we're going to take this 1,437 rand 37,330.03 multiplied by the interest rate of 8.1 divided by 100 multiplied by, right, here guys, it's in months. Okay, here we just multiplied by 1 because we knew that, okay, it was compounded yearly. Okay, but here we've got months. However, we're supposed to now compound or add interest on a yearly basis. However, here, right, the money doesn't stay in the account for the whole year. It stays in the account for just 8 months, right? So we need to now convert that months or those months into years. Okay, how can we convert? We already know that 1 year is equal to 12 months. Okay, so we're gonna multiply this 8 months, right, by what you want, okay, which is in the 1 year divided by what you have, which is 12 months. Okay, so here you'll see that obviously the units for the months and the months will cancel, right? And then taking us back to how we basically need to, how the interest is basically added yearly. Okay, so that is why we need to have that in years. Okay, so it's the same as just saying 8 divided by 12 multiplied by 8 divided by 12. Okay, so this 8 divided by 12 just basically represents us converting the months into years. Okay, here we just multiplied everything by 1 because it's compounded yearly or annually. okay, annually. So when they talk about it being compounded annually, it just means that the interest is calculated every year. Okay, so that is why here it was just multiplied by one, right? But in this case, we need to convert these 8 months into a year figure. Okay, and then to convert months into years, it's just 8 divided by 12. I explained how we basically got to that, right? And if you punch this into your calculator, you'll get that, okay, the interest that he basically earned in the 8 months is 77,615.82162. This is the interest earned, okay, but we want to basically determine how much he has, the final amount that he has, because now he's done. Remember, he just keeps the amount for just 2 years and 8 months. Okay, therefore the final amount that he now has in his account is this. Okay, 1,437,330.03 plus the interest earned of 77,615.82162. I didn't round off here, guys, because I want to maintain the accuracy. I'm only going to round off the final amount, right? And this gives us 1,514,945.852. Okay, so if he basically invests his money in a South African investment account, he will only just make 1,514,945. However, from the foreign company, right, he made 1,529,360. Okay, so for us to basically determine whether his statement was valid, where he stated that he made more than 14,000 return on his foreign investment, right? We just need to now take this amount and you minus 1,514,945.852 to get how much more he made, because we can already see that, okay, from the foreign investment he did actually make more, okay, because we can see that 1.529 is more than that 1.514 that he made in SA. Okay, so we can already see that it's more. But now we want to determine if it was more than 14,000. Okay, so if you basically punch this into your calculator, you'll see that, okay, he made 14,414.148, which is approximately equal to 14,414.15 cents. Okay, and this basically concludes that, okay, his statement was correct. Okay, his statement is valid. He did make more than 14,000 from his foreign investment. Okay, all right. Okay, so just a quick recap of basically what we did in the last question. We want to basically confirm, okay, whether he made more, right? Ryan made more from his foreign investment, okay, than his South African investment. And we want to basically check if that amount that was more, right? We want to basically check if that amount was more than 14,000, okay? And here, guys, the concept that is being basically assessed is calculating interest when that interest is compounded annually, right? So what's important with this section is that you guys realize that when you're calculating your interests, right, you do not use a formula, but you need to now indicate or show all the steps, okay, that you need to follow to basically get to the final value, right? And so if we are basically compounding our interest, right, your interest is calculated on interest, okay, as opposed to interest just being calculated on the principal amount that you've basically invested. Okay, so as you can see here, we generated the interest, right, and we added that interest amount to the original amount, right, to calculate the interest for the next year, right? So that is basically the concept that we basically use when we want to calculate how interest is compounded annually. All right. And the key here, if it's compounded annually, right, you are multiplying all the time by 1 in each year. 1 in each year, right? But now, when it's in months, you need to take into consideration because it was compounded annually. We're dealing with year values, right? So if we have months, that means that we need to now convert those months into years. That is why here, all right, I basically converted that 8 months into years by multiplying by what we want, dividing by what we have, right? Which left us with 8 divided by 12. And then from there, we were able to basically get the final amount that he basically will have in his account when he basically invests in a South African savings account, right? And then from there, we could already see that, okay, the value that he has from the South African company is lower than what he got when he invested in a foreign company. Okay, so now all we needed to do is just subtract the two from each other, and we got that, okay, he actually made 14,414 rand and 15 cents more. Okay, which basically confirms or validates his statement. Okay, so this question is also important, guys. Calculating interest and showing the steps in how you calculate interest is very important, because you guys need to note that in this question you need to show all the steps. You don't just use one formula and substitute, but you show how in each year the interest is calculated. Okay, you need to show that you understand that the interest is calculated not only on the principal amount of 1,230,000, right? But it's calculated on the added interest, right? So then here, interest is calculated on interest. Okay. So that's the special thing about when you calculate interest using the compound method. All right. So that is it, guys, for today's video tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed these two video tutorials, and I'll see you guys on my next upload. That is it, guys, and I'll see you guys on my next upload, Distance Learning with Lee, where I make learning mathematics super easy. Bye, guys.